The views and opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Open Sky Radio. Please be advised.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to The Fire You Can't Put Out, episode number 24. Thank you for following us this far, so far. We are about 7 or 8 months into this show, which is it's pretty sweet. Didn't know that we were going to make it this far, but hey, the way it goes, quite honestly, the show started, myself, Kevin, and Angela. Angela's had to step away from it for a bit, dealing with some family and work issues and things of that nature, and quite honestly, we wish her well. Our good friend, Kevin, my co-host, is still in Hong Kong this week, and he is very excited to make it back to the States eventually, but is quite enjoying his time in Hong Kong. Good for him. And then I myself am doing the show by myself this week again, and that's just fine. I've become very, very comfortable with doing it this way. So once again, I want to thank you for your support. We are the fire you can't put out, even though this fire is about a third of what it was. It's got me. I want to thank the good people at Open Sky Radio for all of their help getting these shows up and helping us with technical support. And it was another wild, woolly week in the news. Certainly not as wild as it was last week, because last week we had all those Supreme Court decisions come down as the Supreme Court found their way out the door so that they could go on summer vacation. They will reconvene the second week of October, which, over the summer, they're going to spend their time giving speeches and visiting their donors and things of that nature. Clarence Thomas, of course, is a teabagger. His wife is a teabagger, and they make a lot of money from those organizations. And then, of course, all the rest of them, they're on teacher schedule, essentially. They get to just take the whole summer off. It's good work if you can get it. That's a lifetime appointment. You can't be fired from that. The Supreme Court works the same way the presidency does, is with respect to being pushed out. You have to be impeached once you join the Supreme Court. And quite honestly, I'd like to see a few of them impeached when it comes to the Voting Rights Act, the Citizens United decision. Anyway, we'll get to that later. Snowden is still on the run, and he is believed to still be in Russia, although nobody can quite confirm where he is. President Putin said that Snowden is welcome to stay in Russia. Now, this happened this week. I'm coming to you the week of the July 4th holiday, and so Putin says, well, you can stay, but Snowden, you've got to stop, disclosing America's secrets, which it seems like a very strange thing for me to hear coming from Putin, because Putin, remember, used to be head of the KGB, which was a spying agency, and he's saying, Snowden, you can stay, but all of the revealing of America's spying, you got to stop doing that. You can't keep that up. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about, not so much with Snowden, because he's on the run, and that's fine. We don't have a lot of information about him, so we're not going to get into him. But I want to get into the AUMF. I don't think a lot of people remember the AUMF being passed. As I say that acronym, does that even spur anything in your mind? More than likely not, but that was the authorization to use military force. That's the sweeping law that allows the president to wage an unlimited global war on terror. Of course, it was put in place after 9/11, because after 9/11, we were scared of everything, up to and including our own shadows, so much that we gave our brand new president, who, by the way, when Bush entered office, because of the Supreme Court decision that put him there, he was an incredibly unpopular president. Also, he was seen as illegitimate because he was placed there by the Supreme Court. So Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, about a month ago, introduced a bill that would repeal the AUMF which was the 2001 authorization to use military force. Two administrations, that's the Bush and the Obama administration, have relied upon the AUMF to use military force in Afghanistan and around the world. They have also used the law to justify practices that lately have become more controversial, including drone strikes that have killed at least 4 Americans and the indefinite detention of terrorist suspects at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where more than 100 detainees are currently on hunger strike. Yeah, this is still in place. And Obama has stated numerous times he wants Guantanamo Bay to be closed. And of course, Obama has ended the war in Iraq on a large scale and is ending the war in Afghanistan. But the AUMF also allows for drone strikes, which the Obama administration is using. Adam Schiff says, I think the timing is right, particularly given the president's speech on June 2nd, arguing that Congress can no longer afford to kick the can down the road on such a vital piece of national security law, one that is now 12 years removed from the event that sparked it. But without the AUMF in force, Congress and the administration would have to decide how to deal with the prisoners of war in absence of a specific war. While dozens of captives at Guantanamo are cleared to be released, many are deemed threats to the United States who cannot be tried or let go. That one seems strange to me, that they can't be tried. A lot of members of Congress, particularly conservative members of Congress, are arguing that the Guantanamo Bay suspects are too dangerous to try in America. As if to say, is if we try them in America, they're too dangerous. Like our courts couldn't hold them. Our prisoners couldn't hold them. Our bailiffs in court could not deal with them. That is the most difficult kernel to pop, said Schiff. There is still a remaining group of people for whom the evidence is either highly classified or highly problematic, because it was a product of torture, and that problem remains to be solved. I know that the authority to detain enemy combatants would end with AUMF, but I do think that Guantanamo ought to come out to an end, ideally to match up with the expiration of the AUMF in about 18 months. So the AUMF is set to expire, but Adam Schiff is saying we should end it now. Ending the AUMF would either force Congress to grapple with that question and confront the de facto policy of perpetual war, or allow the president to grow even more powerful. As of now, that bill is going nowhere, so it goes like this. End the AUMF and deal immediately with Guantanamo Bay, and end the policy of prisoners to go to war, presidents to go to war. Just unilaterally go to war. Or keep it in place. Keep Guantanamo open. Allow the president's powers to expand. Now, the AUMF extends to anybody who becomes president of the United States. So Bush had the power, which left conservatives very comfortable, and liberals the opposite, and now Obama has the power. And of course, although there are some liberals that are okay with him having it, I find myself on the left side of the aisle, and I am not okay with him having it. I was not okay with Bush having it. The president needs to be answerable to us. Member of Congress need to be answerable to us. And on that same note, I would like to see the Supreme Court lose some of its power, because they have become kings and queens answerable to nobody. There are 3 branches of government, and they're supposed to be co-equal. But with the Supreme Court, they're much more powerful than the other 2 bodies right now. And as much as John Boehner and Eric Cantor like to stand up and say that they're answerable to us and the work that they're doing is for the American people, they're not answering to us, and they're not doing anything for us. Right now, Congress, and I know I'm getting off topic here, is working on abortion bill after abortion bill after abortion bill. And that's it. Actually, right now, they're not even in session. They've decided to take the time off right now. They were going to come back for a short session at the beginning of this week. This is the July 4th week, 2013. And then they decided, we're not even going to bother coming back this week. We'll see you next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Yeah, next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Wow! Pretty unbelievable. So with the AUMF, I would also like to get into Section 215. Russ Feingold, who is no longer a member of Congress, was the only senator to vote against the Patriot Act when it was proposed. He released a statement at that time expressing concern that critical information about the way it was being used hadn't been released, information that he believed would have a significant impact on the debate. He singled out information about the use of Section 215 orders that he believed Congress and the American people deserve to know, adding that before we decide whether and in what form to extend these authorities, Congress and the American people deserve to know at least basic information about how they will be used. Section 215 allows the government to use the FISA court, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, to compel businesses to turn over certain information. Congress ought to add limits to the bill, you said at the time, that allow agents to actively pursue criminals, terrorists, spies, but also that protect the privacy of Americans, Feingold said. Or else more privacy abuses would happen. And what we've seen with the last week, what we've seen with all of the information that Snowden has been releasing about FISA and about the NSA, that Section 215 was a bad thing, and it has imposed on civil liberties. So, on October 1st, 2009, the Wisconsin senator issued an additional warning about Section 215 during a Senate Judiciary hearing. And I quote from an article that comes from The Atlantic. Mr. Chairman, I am also a member of the Intelligence Committee. I recall during the debate in 2005 that proponents of Section 215 argued that these authorities had never been misused. They cannot make the statement now because they have been misused. I cannot elaborate here, but I recommend that my colleagues seek more information in a classified setting. Unquote. Statements like these are worth raising now in part because Wisconsin's Tea Party voters ought to understand that when they replaced Feingold with Senator Ron Johnson in 2010, they traded a civil libertarian prescient in the abuses he anticipated with someone else who is absolutely worthless on this issue. To point out the confusion that happened after 9/11, and we're more than a decade after 9/11 now, and the absolute fear and confusion that was everywhere after that happened, allowed these draconian bills. These bills that, quite honestly, a lot of the time weren't even read. Now, the favorite line of conservatives now, when a bill comes up that they don't like, and the reason they don't like it is obviously because they read it, but what they like to say is nobody has read this bill, which is just cute. But quite honestly, bills were not being read back then. They were just being passed. People were freaking out. They were afraid of everything and everyone. So, last week in Wisconsin, speaking to an audience of Democrats, Feingold said, I don't come to you tonight as an office holder. I come to you tonight as a candidate. At least not in 2013, 2014, or 2015. In 2016, the man who beat him, Johnson, is up for re-election. If Feingold managed to retake his seat, he would be a welcome presence in the Senate for civil libertarians. Senators Rand Paul, Wyden, and others could definitely use the help. So, the long-lasting effects of the war, the fear that has, I'm going to say by and large, has subsided since September 2001, the September 2001 attacks. But a lot of this stuff is quite honestly still being felt, and a lot of these policies are still in place. The Iraq War really did nothing for us. It cost a lot of money, it led to a lot of deaths, and the whole Bush war era, too many things are still in place. And honestly, too many things are still in place because the Obama administration has kept up a lot of those things. We covered this a little bit in last week's show. But one of the more interesting things that came out now this came out on May 10th. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this happening around the world. And as well it should. But George W. Bush, President of the United States from 2001 to 2009, illegitimately or otherwise, is now a convicted war criminal. How refreshing it would be to say that kind of thing, to make that kind of statement, and have it be said with respect to the country that he was president of, America. In Kuala Lumpur, it's official. George W. Bush is a war criminal. In what is the first ever conviction of its kind anywhere in the world, the former U.S. president and 7 key members of his administration were found guilty of war crimes on May 10th. Bush, Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, and their legal advisors, Albert Gonzales, David Addington, William Haynes, Jay Bybee, and John Yoo, were tried in absentia in Malaysia. The trial held in Kuala Lumpur heard harrowing witness accounts from victims of torture who suffered at the hands of U.S. soldiers and contractors in Iraq and Afghanistan. They included testimony from British man Mozam Beg, an ex-Guantanamo detainee and Iraqi woman, Jamila Abbas Hamidi, who was tortured in the notorious Abu Ghraib prison. At the end of the week-long hearing, the 5-panel tribunal unanimously delivered guilty verdicts against Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and their key legal advisors, who were all convicted as war criminals for torture, cruel, and inhumane and degrading treatment. Full transcripts of the charges, witness statements, and other relevant material will now be sent to the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, as well as to the United States and Security Council. The Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission is also asking that the names of Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Gonzales, Yoo, Bybee, Addington, and Haynes be entered and included in the Commission's register of war criminals for the public record. The tribunal is the initiative of Malaysia's retired Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, who staunchly opposed the American-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. After the guilty verdict reached by 5 senior judges was delivered, Mahathir Mohamad said powerful countries are getting away with murder. War crimes expert and lawyer Francis Boyle, professor of the international law at the University of Illinois College of Law in America, was part of the prosecution team. After the case, he said, "This is the first conviction of these people anywhere in the world." He added that he was optimistic the tribunal would be followed up elsewhere in the world where countries have a duty to try war criminals. And he cited the case of the former Chilean dictator Agustin Pinochet, who was arrested in Britain to be extradited to Spain on charges of war crimes. Pinochet was only 8 years out of his presidency when that happened. Okay, so, the things that the court heard. Just want to give you a few of these. Abbas Abid, a 48-year-old engineer from Fallujah in Iraq, had his fingernails removed by pliers. Ali Shalal was attached with bare electrical wires and electrocuted and hung from a wall. Mozam Beg was beaten, hooded, and put in solitary confinement. Jamila was stripped and humiliated and used as a human shield whilst being transported by helicopter. Mozam Beg, now working as a director for the London-based human rights group Cage Prisoners, said he was delighted with the verdict, but added, when people talk about Nuremberg, you have to remember that those tried were all prosecuted after the war. Technically, the Bush-Cheney wars aren't totally over yet. Although Iraq is ended, we've still got a few people in Iraq, and Afghanistan is ending. So we'll have to... quite honestly, we'll see how this turns out. But I want to finish up here. Right now, Guantanamo is still open, and people are still being held and tortured out there. in response to questions about the difference between the Bush and Obama administrations, he added, if President Bush was the president of the extrajudicial torture, then President Barack Obama is the president of extrajudicial killing through drone strikes, and our work has only begun. Essentially saying, and I brought this up earlier, although we're ending the wars, Obama is using the AUMF, and Obama is conducting drone strikes, and innocent people are still dying, unfortunately, even at this president's hand. And so what this guy is saying is, yeah, we've convicted Bush, and hopefully after the wars are completely ended, we'll be able to truly bring these war criminals to justice. It's pretty unlikely. Here in America, we tend to protect war criminals when they're our own. But he's also hinting at the fact that Obama could be tried just the same because of his use of drone strikes. So President Lemon told a packed courtroom, as a tribunal of conscience, the tribunal is fully aware that its verdict is merely declaratory in nature. The tribunal has no power of enforcement, no power to impose any custodial sentence on any one of the 8 convicted prisoners. What we can do, he continued, under Article 31 of Chapter 6 of Part 2 of the Charter is to recommend that the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission to submit this finding of conviction by the tribunal together with a record of these proceedings to the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court as well as the United States and the Security Council. So, the world has not forgotten the effects of the Bush War. And the effects of the Bush War, quite honestly, are going to resonate forever. Bush and his goons to this day still continue to live free and as free men. It's nice to hear, yeah, he's been convicted in Kuala Lumpur. But after his presidency, because he left President Bush, after he left office because he was so unpopular, he's remained largely quiet. Every time he opens his mouth, it's just a reminder. I mean, even the sound of his voice, to me, just became something absolutely unbearable. Because every time he opened his mouth, I said, oh my goodness, he's just going to say something completely dumb. Or illegal. So, he remained pretty quiet after leaving office. Which was welcome. But it also let people say, oh, why is he so quiet? Well, President Bush more and more, since the AUMF has come up again, and since the NSA thing has come up because of Edward Snowden disclosing it again, Bush is now speaking out. He's speaking out in defense. I can't even believe I'm saying this. He's speaking out in defense of President Obama, saying that Snowden is compromising national security by releasing details of the NSA program, and by putting this on the front burner, and by causing Al-Qaeda to change the tactics that they use, because he's letting everybody know what we're doing. Well, everyone knows what we're doing. It's not news, as I've said before, and President Bush is defending Barack Obama. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. President Bush was just convicted of war crimes in Kuala Lumpur. And now he's defending our current president, our sitting president, Barack Obama. Business and war, I suppose, make strange bedfellows, or national security. Anyway, we'll see how this shakes out. I think there's going to be quite a few more countries that will be coming forward and convicting Bush as well. And it's a long time coming. And although it'll probably never happen, nothing would make me happier than to see Bush in prison stripes. Yeah, it's a dated reference, I suppose. But he deserves it. There's a lot of people still suffering because of his unneeded, unnecessary, and illegal wars. I want to cover a few smaller stories that I think deserve mentioning, and then I want to get into another larger subject. So, Danny Warfel, the principal deputy commissioner of the IRS, acknowledged that the same tactic, this was on Monday, June 24th, the same tactic that got the tax agency in trouble for screening Tea Party organizations before the 2012 elections was used elsewhere by agency officials. In a conference call with reporters, Warfel said in an internal investigation of the IRS scandal, the findings of which were released Monday afternoon, had unearthed other instances in which BOLO, or Be on the Lookout list, were used. He has since ended the use of the tactic, he said, calling the screening criteria used in these other instances inappropriate. When I got to the IRS, we started a more comprehensive review of the operations of this part of the IRS. And we've been looking at documents and business operations, and we did determine and discover that there are other BOLO lists in place, Werfel said. And upon discovering that, we also found that we believed there continued to be inappropriate or questionable criteria on these BOLO lists. Once we came to that conclusion, we took immediate action to suspend the use of those lists in the exempt organizations unit within the IRS. Warfel declined to reveal which organizations appeared on those lists and what criteria were used to screen them, saying it took time to scrub these documents of sensitive information, but his comments are bound to renew criticism of the tax agency, which has been under fire for weeks after it singled out conservative groups applying for 501c4 status. Though he acknowledged his investigation remains incomplete, Werfel said that he had yet to uncover international wrongdoing by IRS officials when applying for BOLOs, nor had he found instances in which outside groups, mainly the Obama campaign and administration, had pressured the tax agency to target conservative groups. Now that's been the narrative. They're targeting teabaggers. My term, by the way. They're targeting teabaggers. It must be the Obama administration trying to silence his critics. Things like that come from groups that have an absolutely ill understanding of what a 50C4 group is. It is a social welfare group. So then this came out. The Associated Press has obtained an internal IRS document that reveals the other terms the agency screened for when deciding which groups should be granted tax-exempt status. The news cuts against the original storyline that the tactic was used against conservative groups. An internal IRS document obtained by the Associated Press said that besides Tea Party, and that's in quotes, lists used by screeners to pick groups for close examination also included the terms Israel, Progressive, and Occupy. The document said an investigation into why specific terms were included was still underway. So, here's the thing. They went after groups that said Tea Party or Patriot or whatever smokescreen word that they use to cover up the fact that they are the exact opposite of patriots. But the IRS was also looking for leftist groups. When Acorn got defunded and eventually killed by Congress, that group, what they largely did was voter drives. That's social welfare. Most of what they did in Acorn was social welfare. A little bit of what Acorn did was political. Okay, that's okay for a 501c4 group. These teabagger groups, most, if not everything that they do is political. It's not social welfare. The very meaning of Tea Party organizations is absolutely anti-American. Look, when you make the argument that the government can't do anything, the government should have this, that, and the other taken away from it, what you are saying is that you and I cannot be trusted with those powers. You and I cannot be trusted who to put into government. With my example earlier, Russ Feingold warned us about Section 215. We were warned about the AUMF, but it was largely Democrats speaking out against those things. They were passed anyway out of fear. And in 2010, the Congress was loaded down with teabaggers who did the exact opposite of what they said they were going to do. More and more of our freedoms have been removed. They're listening on our phone calls. the Tea Party candidates replaced candidates that were actually respecting the Constitution. So when they say the government can't do anything right and we should put this, that, and the other in private hands, what you're saying, ladies and gentlemen, because the government's us. No matter how you slice it, the government's us. Yeah, you're putting terrible people in office. You're putting people in office who are saying, we hate the government. The government can't do anything right. Government is bad. Government is the problem. Government is awful. You are putting those people into power. And then when those people get in there and government doesn't work, you're going, see, what do you know? Government doesn't work. Well, actually it did if you elect the people who believe in America. But you're not. You're taking people who say that they hate America, because when they're saying we shouldn't, you can't do this, when they say government can't do it, they're talking about you. Because a vacuum is created where there's a need. And it's either going to be you and me, us, or it's going to be a private corporation. So when you're saying that vacuum should be, take government away, which takes us out of the decisions, well, then a private corporation is going to step in. And that's a kingdom. That is not a democracy. That's going to be headed up by one guy with a bunch of guys working underneath him. That's a kingdom. So, anyway, so back to my original point. When they say, they're targeting teabagger groups. They're targeting Occupy groups too. They're targeting people who are involved in politics and not involved in social welfare. And you know what? This is absolutely a dead issue now. They were targeting anybody who seemed unworthy of 501c4 status, and it's a non-issue. But you know what? I'm fairly certain over on Fox, they're still screaming about how the IRS went after the teabaggers, and Obama was at the head of it. As far as this show is concerned, as far as rational Americans are concerned, this is a dead issue. And what the IRS was doing was absolutely dead on. I wish they would have shut those groups down. Every one of them. Or just taken away their 501c4 status. Because they don't deserve it. You're involved in politics and not social welfare. End of story. Okay. So, following another, I got a good story. Well, somewhat good. Teen HPV rates were cut in half after the vaccine went public. Now, this is great. Because this is a disease that's pretty common, and it's long plagued young women. Following the 2006 introduction of a vaccine against cancer-causing human papillomavirus, rates of HPV in teen girls have plummeted in nearly half. A study found on Wednesday, June 19th. The Journal of Infectious Diseases reports that HPV infection in girls 14 to 19 dropped from 11.5% for the years 2003 to 2006 to 5.1% for 2007 to 2010. Since HPV can lead to cervical cancer, the results could also herald a drop in cancer rates for girls in that age range too. The study illustrates a great advancement in public health, but it also underlines the consequences for those huge numbers of women and girls who are still not getting the vaccinations. In 2011, only 35% of girls ages 13 to 17 received all 3 shots in the vaccination series. Only 30% of women ages 19 to 16 had received the vaccine. So, why aren't more people getting it? It's obviously working. Or more young women. Why aren't more young women getting it? Well, fear-mongering and conspiracy theories over the side effects of the HPV vaccine are a major reason that the inoculation rates are so low. While the CDC have deemed the shot safe and especially effective for young girls, 16% of parents report that not letting their children get shots for fear of side effects. In fact, incidents of cancer from HPV are rising in the U.S., and the CDC says rates of inoculation are unacceptably low. You may remember that Michelle Bachmann said that this was going to lead, this vaccine for HPV was going to lead to, forgive my language, mental retardation. That she had heard from a woman whose daughter became mentally retarded after getting the shot, which is a completely uncorroborated thing, obviously. And Rick Perry backpedaled on his support of the state's legislation requiring Texan girls to get the vaccine. And another Republican governor South Carolina's Governor Nikki Haley vetoed a bill that would have made HPV vaccines free of cost to girls in her state. The vaccine's working, and that's great. And it really should be made more widely available. But it's not. And there's a lot of fear-mongering about it. And it's only from the faith-based, fact-free community of the Republican Party. I have 3 daughters, and quite honestly, they're all going to get the vaccine because I don't want them to get sick. Republicans will try to say, well, you're telling them that they can have sex when they get this. That's actually not what I'm telling them. And as much as I don't particularly like the idea because I'm their dad, I know that one day they're going to have sex. And if I can have them not get cervical cancer and be on this planet with me for longer, then you damn right, they're getting the vaccine. I don't buy into the fear-mongering, quite honestly, but then again, I'm a rational person. So, good on the vaccine. Glad it's out there. What in the hell is wrong with the Republican Party? So, atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide surpassed a notable milestone this week. They reached a daily average of 400 parts per million. That's reported by NOAA, NOAA, for the first time in human history. The milestone hit on May 9th, although it because it's 400, they're saying it's symbolic. But man-made CO2 emissions from the burning of fossil fuels continue to rise and bring greater atmospheric warming and exacerbating the effects of climate change. Scientists argue we've loaded the climate dice in favor of more weather anomalies and extreme heat waves. So let me try to put this in perspective for you. Of the last 10 years, nine of those years were the hottest on record since records began being kept in the 1850s, I believe. 350 parts per million. According to the 350.org, that's kind of the threshold. Once we pass that point, we're really playing with fire. And hitting 400 parts per million, we're now doing that. So, in hearing the global warming debate, and by the way, the United States is the only country still debating this issue, because our Republicans simply choose to not believe science. Once again, the faith-based, fact-free community, which is not meant to disparage all people of faith. I know very reasonable people of faith, but I challenge you to show me a Republican who is denying science, denying facts, and who is not a person of faith. It's just somehow they tend to go hand in hand. Republican, faithful, you know what? More than likely they're going to deny facts and they're going to deny science. So in listening to the debate over global warming, I've heard a lot of conservatives say, well, look, every time you breathe, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. Well, okay, let's talk about that for a minute, okay? When we exhale, we are cycling, okay? We breathe it out. We breathe in oxygen, breathe out carbon dioxide, okay? Trees take in the carbon dioxide, exhale oxygen, okay? So we are simply, along with the plants or the trees by and large, we're simply cycling carbon dioxide. It's pretty simple, okay? Real easy idea, okay? So when we take fossil fuels out of the ground and we burn them, we're introducing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere that was not there before. Isn't it too much? Okay? And this introducing it into the environment has caused higher temperatures. And here's what's happening with the oceans. The ice is melting, okay? The ice that's been around for thousands or millions of years is now beginning to melt. With the high temperatures, the ice melts, becomes water. When it was ice before, it was white, so it reflected a lot of the sun's rays back out, okay? So what we're doing right now is we're putting carbon dioxide up into the atmosphere. It's trapping gases, and then we're melting the ice, the polar ice, okay? And it's no longer reflecting the sunlight. It's now, it's melting, it's becoming water, it's becoming the oceans, and the ocean is absorbing more and more of it. The ocean is getting warmer and warmer, and it's leading to more and more fierce storms. So why are we here in America still debating global warming? Why is there such a disconnect with 97% of scientists, and I'm imagining the other 3 are employed by the fossil fuel industry, with 97% of scientists saying that global warming is absolutely hands down real? Why is there still a debate in America about global warming? Koch heads. Yeah, you heard me. Koch heads. A new 2-year study by the Investigative Reporting Workshop at American University this demonstrates how the Koch brothers, the oil billionaires, have helped derail climate change legislation. The conservative group Americans for Prosperity, which the Kochs bankroll, pushed lawmakers to sign a pledge not to vote for legislation relating to climate change that includes a net increase in government revenue. Remember the Grover Norquist tax pledge? Every single Republican signed it, and a couple of Democrats signed it. But what it said was that, the Grover Norquist pledge was not to raise any taxes, ever, right? Okay. So in 2011 and 2012, Koch Industries Public Sector LLC, the lobbying arm of Koch Industries, advocated for the Energy Tax Prevention Act, which would have rolled back the Supreme Court's ruling that the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, could regulate greenhouse gases. The bill was sponsored by Representative Upton, Fred Upton, Republican from Michigan, and co-signed by 92 Republicans and 3 Democrats, 61 of whom signed an anti-climate tax pledge. An economist with the American Council for Capital Formation, a nonprofit group that receives Koch money, testified about that same bill before the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Margot Thorning told members of the House in February 2011 that regulation of greenhouse emissions makes little economic or environmental sense, according to their testimony. Jane Mayer of The New Yorker, who first flagged the study, explains that since most solutions to the problem of greenhouse gas emissions require costs to the polluters and the public, the pledge essentially commits those who sign it to vote against nearly all meaningful bills regarding global warming and acts as yet another roadblock to action. You ever seen the Koch brothers? They're up there in years, which we're not going to hold against them necessarily, but I feel fairly certain that they feel like, well, they're making a lot of money right now because money on oil is made in 2 ways. And by the way, their dad, they inherited this oil company from their dad, okay? And if they admit that global warming is real, gasoline or oil will become instantly unprofitable. Because we subsidize them right now, okay, the oil industry, they're subsidized by the government, so they get a lot of money from the government. And then, of course, their externalities, which are the cancer-causing agents that are put into the environment by burning fossil fuels, they don't have to pay to clean those up. If they admit that they are putting cancer-causing things into the environment, they're going to have to start paying to clean those things up. They're going to lose their subsidies from the federal government. And if they don't charge us, the people who burn gasoline, probably about $10 a gallon for gasoline, they're not going to make any money. And I think that that's great because that would force change. In Germany and a lot of other countries around the world, they have a lot of electric cars, okay? And people say, well, electric cars, but you're still getting your power from electricity, which you gotta burn coal for. Well, no, you don't, because we've got the greatest source of energy anywhere in the universe. It's called the sun. In this country, we call solar energy a pipe dream. I live in Portland, Oregon. And in Portland, Oregon, there are companies everywhere that sell solar panels, and we even have a huge company out in Hillsboro that manufactures these things right here in America. It's a huge industry down here. You can drive around Portland. You can see that people houses, street signs, businesses. There's tons and tons of people that use solar energy. And we don't get as much sun as, say, Florida or California does. But Germany's the cloudiest country in the world. And they get most of their power from solar, and they get a whole bunch of it from wind. We could do the same thing. But thanks to the fact that we listen to the Koch brothers, we don't. We call it a pipe dream. So, as much as I don't like the idea of paying so much for gasoline, getting rid of fossil fuels, the 400 parts per million, it's probably irreversible at this point, or seemingly irreversible, but it's worth a try. It's worth a try for ourselves, for our children and grandchildren, for our people that are suffering from the cancers that are caused by pumping that crap into the air. It's worth a try. And if nothing else, hey, if you get your power from wind, and I understand that there's no one solution that's going to solve it all, but if you get your power from the sun and from wind, at least as a part of your energy portfolio, you're going to save money, and a lot of it. And you're not going to be pumping crap into the air. And you're also not going to be supporting the Koch brothers, who are awful, awful human beings. How awful? Dick Cheney awful. I mean, I don't know. I think Dick Cheney's the worst person in the world. I'm not a religious man. I don't believe in God or the devil. But if there is to be a person who is the most evil person ever, I believe that person is Dick Cheney. I'm getting off the subject here. But we passed 400 parts per million. And as unfortunate as it is, I don't think we should give up. I think we should continue to strive for change. I think we should continue pushing our legislators to green energy. Continue pushing our people towards green energy. Because it's working around the world. And there's no reason it couldn't work here. Hell, I'm pretty sure just covering the state of Florida in solar panels could power the entire nation. It's a lot of sun that we get. And there's no reason why we can't get our power that way. I want to get into the Supreme Court just a little bit. Antonin Scalia, for various reasons, is not the left's favorite Supreme Court justice, but in a spat of rulings in this term, Scalia has come down on the same side as the more liberal justices on the court. Those cases related to Fourth Amendment issues, particularly involving warrantless searches and conducted using advanced technological methods. The most recent example of this 5-4 decision that came down about a month ago was a Maryland law allowing police officers to take DNA samples of arrestees without a warrant for the purposes of investigating crimes unrelated to the arrest. Scalia dissented with an opinion joined by Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ginsburg, the 4 more liberal justices. And he said, "Today's judgment will, to be sure, have the beneficial effect of solving crimes," Scalia wrote in his dissent. "Then again, so would taking the DNA samples from anyone who flies on an airplane. Surely the TSA needs to know the identity of the flying public, or who applies for a driver's license, attends a private school. Perhaps the construction of such a generic panopticon is wise, but I doubt that the proud men who wrote the Charter of Our Liberties would be so easy to open their mouths for royal inspection." In one case in March, for instance, in a 5-4 vote, the court, in an opinion written by Scalia, held that police officers' use of a drug-sniffing dog in an area surrounding a home constitutes a Fourth Amendment search, and so generally requires a warrant. Kagan, Sotomayor, Ginsburg, and Clarence Thomas all joined his opinion. In another case from February, the court ruled 6-3 that the police can't detain someone once he or she has left the immediate vicinity of a premise that is about to be searched. So, let me say this. It's interesting, Scalia, because he's a homophobe. And, he generally comes down on the hard right side of a lot of issues. After DOMA was overturned, after Prop 8 wasn't ruled on, after it was dismissed, he was just furious at the fact that the cases didn't turn out how he wanted, furious at the fact that he wasn't, that discrimination didn't become the law of the land, but he also came down on the side of Citizens United, which put our elections up for sale. Okay, so he's not a friend, but with the Fourth Amendment, he's pretty staunch. And this July 4th, the Fourth Amendment is on a lot of people's minds with Section 215, with the AUMF, with the NSA, with Snowden. The Fourth Amendment is on everybody's minds. By the time this show comes out, quite honestly, it'll be after the 4th, but you can visit these websites, restorethefourth.net, which is a movement. There's quite a few groups that are doing this, is a movement to restore the Fourth Amendment. Because this, if ever there is common ground, it seems to be the Fourth Amendment right now. That's where a lot of people are coming together. They're becoming more conscious of the Fourth Amendment. And they're definitely taking notice of it this 4th of July. So restorethefourth.net or stopwatching.us. I love that one. That's Stop Watching Us. It's very cute. Stopwatching.us. We're all thinking about it this year. And although Scalia, and by the way, he was one of the people that told us to get over the Bush v. Gore decision. Although Scalia can be a bit of that's not nice language, a bit of a dirtbag on issues. If there's an issue we can all come down on, like this, like the Fourth Amendment, I think it's very important that we seize that opportunity. And what better day to think of that than on the 4th of July? Let us talk about, I want to get this story out of the way real quick. Because high-capacity magazines have gone by the wayside in Colorado. Amid bursts of near-distant gunfire, Ray Sanchez looked down at his rangefinder and told the man lying prone with his rifle the bad news. No joy. Sanchez was given pointers on long-range shooting Saturday at the Pawnee Sportsman Center as part of the Colorado Freedom Shoot. The event, which was sponsored by the shooting range, was dubbed the final opportunity to shoot high-capacity magazines in the state of Colorado before a ban on 15-round clips goes into effect this past Monday. Sharing the views of most, if not all, of the event's attendees, Sanchez said he doubts the law will do much good. There's already laws against killing people. I hate this argument, by the way. But people go and do it anyway, Sanchez said. So if someone's willing to go and do something like that, what's it take to bring in a magazine from another state that is more than 15 rounds or whatever arbitrary number they picked? You know what, Sanchez? I couldn't agree with you more. Let's ban them across the entire nation because nobody needs a high-capacity magazine. Nobody needs a 100-round drum unless they're going to go on a killing spree. He continued, I'm a pretty hardcore libertarian, so I think that the Democrats that we have in office now are probably the worst we've had in a long time, he said, which is just cute, because Obama did nothing during the previous 4 years with respect to gun issues, and then this time, after we had so many shootings, he's finally decided to do something, and now he's the worst thing ever. So some may see this as the wrong thing to do politically, said Eric Brown, but he told the Denver Post in a story about a shooting event in Glendale and said that this is absolutely the right thing to do. Sanchez and others are following the process closely, and he's hoping that the law will be overturned. Getting rid of high-capacity magazines is a good start, and I think it needs to be a state-by-state thing. You can check this story over at the Huffington Post and some of the other websites, but if you check the picture at the Huffington Post, if you take a look at these guys, holding up their guns with their high-capacity magazines, the banana clips, and all the rest, you'd swear that somebody just removed their genitals. They're just so, how could somebody take away my bullets? Or my penis. They seem to be interchangeable with these folks. But I'm glad that the decision, that they've made the decision in Colorado, which is where the Aurora shooting happened, inside the movie theater. And I think that we need more decisions just like it. So I want to leave you with this. Texas will immediately enact a voter ID law that a panel of federal judges ruled last year would impose a strict, unforgiving burden on the poor. A top state official said Tuesday the decision to go forward with a measure that those federal judges called the most stringent in the country comes after the Supreme Court ruled that a key provision of the landmark Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional. With today's decision, the state's voter ID law will take effect immediately, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott said in a statement. Redistricting maps passed by the legislature may also take effect without approval from the federal government. In blocking those redistricting maps last year, a separate panel of federal judges ruled that the government provided more evidence of discriminatory intent than we have space or need to address, in their opinion. Attorney General Eric Holder cited the Texas redistricting case in this statement, criticizing the Supreme Court's ruling. So, a poll has finally been done about this, and it said Americans have mixed feelings about the Supreme Court's latest rulings, with a majority disapproving of its opinions of the Voting Rights Act, but in favor of two pro-gay marriage options. Just a third say they agree with the court's decision to strike down part of the Voting Rights Act, while 51% disagreed. Knowledge about and disapproval of the VRA decision was especially high among African Americans, 71% of whom expressed disagreement with the ruling. Just 3% were undecided, while 16% of all adults had no opinion. We were essentially told by the Supreme Court that not to worry, we are in a almost completely not racist or post-racial America, and to those people on the Supreme Court that believe that, I would like to say Paula Deen and George Zimmerman. We are absolutely not in a post-racial America. This from a story during the 2012 election, okay, where Eric Holder said that the voter ID laws were like poll taxes. And then Holder pointed this out. A concealed handgun license would serve as an acceptable ID to vote, but a student ID would not. And he went on to say that only 8% of white people do not have government-issued photo IDs. About 25% of black people lack such identification. And there is the whole key to the voter ID law. Okay, they know that minorities, African Americans and Latinos, vote largely Democratic. And they go, you know what? Those people don't usually have state IDs, or 25%. That's a pretty good number of people that they can keep away from the polls. The strength with respect to the Republican Party has never been in getting out the vote. It's been in suppressing the vote. So they say if you've got a student ID, because students generally vote Democratic, then you know that won't work. But if you've got a concealed carry license, then hey, you can vote. So let's say this. Turning over the VRA means that voter ID laws could become the new literacy test. An ID, even state issued in some of these states, will not be adequate. You know what is adequate? A concealed carry ID. You know why? Because those people are more likely to vote Republican. So they say, so they did this very carefully. Student ID, unacceptable. Why? You might vote Democratic. Concealed carry, acceptable. Why? Because you're gonna vote Republican. So I have an idea. Let's get all of our minority brothers and sisters concealed carry permits. I'll tell you what, to get a state-issued ID, I've got to go in there with so much identification. It is ridiculous, but necessary. To get a concealed carry permit, by and large, with the help of the NRA trying to get a gun into the hand of every person in America so that they can sell more weapons, sell more bullets, sell more, a concealed carry ID is vastly easier to get. So, the solution? Because with the Supreme Court getting rid of the VRA, I would say the solution now is going to have to be in getting all of our minority brothers and sisters concealed carry permits so that they can continue to vote. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but hey, whatever it takes, right? So my dishonorable mention for this week is going to be the Republican Party. The entire party. As I mentioned earlier, they decided to just take this entire week off. This is the week of July 4th. And they've decided to come back next Tuesday. So they're back home with their constituents, raising money and meeting with the people that own them. Not you and I. I'm talking about corporations. But the deadline was July 4th. July 4th to stop interest rates from doubling. That's right. College students taking out new loans for the fall term will see interest rates twice what they were in the spring because Congress fulfilled its pledge to restore lower rates by the July 4th holiday. Subsidized Stafford loans, which account for roughly a quarter of all direct federal borrowing, went from 3.4% interest to 6% interest rate on Monday, July 1st. We already have in America just a huge problem with the amount of money that is owed by students who have decided to further their education, and that's unfortunate because I think college should be free because it's obviously an investment in America. The Republicans see it very differently. And even though the new higher interest rates were brought to us by the Republican Party, thanks to their inaction, I can tell you exactly how this is going to go down when the Republicans come back next week. They're going to be screaming at the top of their lungs about how this is Obama's fault, about how Obama did this, and send all your letters to Obama. That'll work with people who don't know how government works, but it won't work with the rest of us, those of us that pay attention. So yeah, my DM for this week, the Republican Party, really, what in the hell is wrong with you guys? Anyway, that concludes another episode of The Fire You Can't Put Out. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank my brother Kevin who's out there. I want to wish Angela well in her life. Hope to see her back one of these days. And I want to thank you for listening. This has been another episode of The Fire You Can't Put Out. Happy July 4th to everybody. Independence Day. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you for the support, and I will catch you next week. Good day.